Let's look for our next contract. Explore Kerbal. Rendezvous, 2 vessels in orbit. Hmm. I'm going to look real quick at our tech tree. So one thing that I noticed happen earlier is once you have this docking port unlocked, you'll start getting contracts for, actually, yeah, it said space stations and doing dockings. Doing a rendezvous in Kerbal orbit is usually the next progression contract you get. And one easy way to do it is to do one of the rescue contracts that usually pops up. Sometimes if you have this docking port unlocked, it's going to ask you to do a docking in Kerbal orbit. And since I don't want to launch 2 ships and dock them together, I'm actually going to go for the klaw. Grabbing a ship with the klaw counts as docking. But I need to upgrade research and development to do that. Okay. Next up, is there anything else that I'm going to need? Oh, I'll need RCS to do the docking as well. And you don't have to do it in this order. You know, if you want to just do a rendezvous and do a rescue and skip the docking parts, that works just fine. I'm kind of trying to maximize progression per launch. And this is a good time to show rendezvous and docking. Okay, so like I said before, these progression contracts will refresh when this timer up here expires. You can't decline them, but you can just wait. And we want to look for a contract to rescue someone from Kerbal orbit. So I'm going to wait 2 days or more. Oh, it's rendezvous again. Interesting. Okay, try again. Well, that's fine. Okay, so here's a note about rendezvous contracts. Oh, and the reason I'm doing this, I didn't say it out loud. The rendezvous has to be vessels from 2 separate launches. You can't just like put 2 command pods on a ship together, do a decouple, and then like say, hey, look, they're rendezvoused. They have to be 2 separate launches. I don't want to bother launching 2 ships just to do this contract. So the command pods that get created for these rescue missions count as a separate launch. And so if you just do a rescue mission, it's going to count as rendezvous. Next thing about rescue missions, they have different difficulty levels. The ones with 1 star are likely in low equatorial Kerbal orbit. If they have more than 1 star, they're probably in some random wacky orbit. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, we'll just do the low one. Those are more common. Okay, I think I have all the parts I need. May need to upgrade the VAB this time. Oh, I do need to upgrade mission control. I think. Yeah, it'll help. Okay, we're going to start with a new rocket, because this is not about science. This is about rendezvous. And this time, right, we actually don't want to take the monoprop out. So we're going to use it. So I'm going to go through with the grabbing anyway, even though I don't have a contract for it. since that's up there, I'll put a parachute here. And another monoprop tank over here. I probably won't need the extra monoprop, but you know, if you're a new player, you're probably going to use a lot more monoprop than I am. It's fine. Just one tank should be enough. Do our heat shield, and again, remove the ablator. So again, you'll see the pretty familiar upper stage here with our Terrier engine. Put some solar panels on it. Now we're going to need to add RCS thrusters. I think the small ones are mainly for satellites. I haven't used these much. We'll use the bigger ones. And you only need 2. I'm going to estimate that I'll be at about half fuel. And click the button down here to show the center mass. You want to place them more or less directly over the center of mass. So that way they won't cause the rocket to rotate when they fire. Okay. And then we're going to change this to the orthogonal 5-horn variant. And what that does is we now have thrusters in all 3 axes. With the default variant and only 2 thrusters, we're missing this left-right axis. But if we go here, we can actually move in all directions, and you only need 2 thrusters. Here's another trick, but I need advanced tweakables turned on to do it. I haven't shown that yet. In the settings, there's a couple options that are not enabled by default, but they really should be. Advanced tweakables is one, and extended burn indicator is the other. You should turn those both on. Okay. And what advanced tweakables lets us do is you can right-click this thruster, show actuation toggles, and now we can enable it or disable it for different kinds of control. And what I want to do is I want to turn off yaw, pitch, and roll, the rotation axes, so that these are only going to get used for translation, not rotation. And that's going to save a ton of monoprop, because these aren't going to be firing when the ship is turning, only when I want to translate. Put that in there again. Okay. And I think that is all we need in the upper stage. Put those together. We'll do, once again, our classic 4 tanks and a swivel. Okay, check our stats. Vacuum DV. We're just going to low orbit, but we'll need a little bit extra to do the rendezvous. 4,700 is perfectly fine, more than enough. Sea level takeoff, 1.17. So again, I could use boosters for this one. 1.38, 43. I don't want to mess with the top stage. I could probably remove some fuel from the upper stage and make that work better. But let's just do this. If I was really trying to be extremely efficient about this, oh, you know what? There actually is a trick. Yeah, let's do this trick. So I've shown a couple different ways to design these rockets now. Right, our problem is that our thrust-to-weight ratio for takeoff isn't high enough. Instead of a swivel, I'm going to toss 2 thuds on there. The thud by itself is a little bit weaker than, it's a lot weaker than the swivel, but 2 of them is more powerful than the swivel. Yeah, so that gives you 1.48. That's perfect. And vacuum DV is still good. Cool. Now look at the difference in price. 2 thuds would cost $1640. The swivel is $1200 by itself. 2 hammers would be another $800, so that's $2000, plus 2 radial decouplers is another $1200. Yeah, let me show the difference here like this. I'll put this back together. Radial decouplers are surprisingly expensive. It's fine to use them. I mean, especially in normal mode, you almost always have enough money. But you can build things much, much cheaper. Okay, so this rocket in total costs $8,600. 7,184. It doesn't matter that much, but it's like, you know, it's like a percent of my total funds right now. All right, I think we're good to go. I think if there's anything else I need here. Nope. Okay, so there he is in orbit. We're gonna set him as a target. A good rule of thumb, we're gonna wanna get up into orbit kind of close to him if we can. And a good rule of thumb for things in low Kerbal orbit like this is you want to launch roughly when they're coming up over the horizon to the west. Now I'm going to go a little bit early because for things in low orbit, you don't want to let them get ahead of you. It's harder to catch up to something in low orbit than it is to fall back down to it. So we're going to launch to our low standard equatorial orbit. And the reason it's harder to catch up to something in low orbit is that in order to catch up, you have to lower your orbit so it goes faster. But if you're already at 80 kilometers, there's not a lot of space above the atmosphere where you can lower your orbit to get that faster orbit. So we're going to try and make sure that he doesn't get ahead of us. We're doing a rendezvous docking rescue contract. My initial turn was a little bit aggressive, so I'm pulling back up towards vertical a little bit. Okay, good now. Back to ProGrid. Okay, so this is good. The down pointing orange marker is our position, and the upwards one is their position at the close approach. We want to make sure we're ahead of them. Phone's green. Right, so we want to just get to orbit. Okay, the Navball switched to target mode. I don't care about the target quite yet. I just want to focus on getting to orbit here. Now, if I was really trying to show off, I would do a direct orbit rendezvous where I meet that target directly from ascent, and then as part of my circularization burn, basically do the rendezvous. But I'm going to do this in a little bit more traditional and straightforward way, just to kind of demonstrate the general techniques of rendezvous. So you actually see this close approach is right. Well, so much for that idea. What I wanted to do was get into a circular orbit at about 80 kilometers and then show how to do the adjustment to do the rendezvous. Maybe I'll artificially mess this up just to show that. So I'm going to bring my apoapsis back down to like 80. 87, that's fine. Okay, so this is a situation you might find yourself in. That's all right, also pretty close. The first thing you want to do with rendezvous is get your plane matched. And you do that at the AN or the DN, the ascending node or descending node. And I'm not even going to bother using nodes here, maneuver nodes, that is. At the ascending node, you need to burn anti-normal. And the easy way to remember that is AN and ascending node and anti-normal are both AN. Anti-normal is the down pointing purple triangle. We just burn slightly here, and that number should start decreasing. We want to get it down to 0 or close to 0 as we can. Perfect. The next thing to do is to get your orbits to touch at just one point. It seems like they're already pretty close. Once again, maybe I'll just kind of mess this up on purpose and see what happens. Okay, so say you're in a situation like this. Well, actually here, let's really mess it up this time. Okay. So I don't even have close approach markers anymore. If your orbits aren't touching, what you need to do is get them to touch at exactly one point. You can use maneuver nodes to try and figure out where the best place to do that is. It doesn't really matter where. I'm just going to burn retrograde until the opposite side of my orbit touches theirs. And when you have your orbits touching and your inclination is close to 0, you should see close approach markers. Oh, this is bad, because now I'm actually behind them. Remember, the down pointing marker is your position, and the upward pointing one is the target position. Since I'm behind the target, I would need to okay, sorry, let me start over. If you place a maneuver node right after that down marker, then you're going to see the predicted intercept on the next orbit after the maneuver. And that's generally the one that you want to try and meet the target. Now I want to burn retrograde because it's going to reduce my orbital period so that I can actually catch up to them. but I suspect that if I burn retrograde enough for these two to line up, that my periapsis is going to be too low. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where it's easier to fall back to a target in low orbit than it is to catch up to a target in low orbit. Because in order to meet the target there, I would have to do a burn that would put my periapsis into the atmosphere. This isn't going to work. So maybe I'll show something that isn't very efficient, but works in general. So instead of trying to catch up to them, I'm actually going to do a prograde burn, and I'm going to catch them. They're going to do 2 orbits while I'm going to do 1, and I'll catch them on the next time around. Ooh, that's going to be spicy. Okay, never mind. Not going to do that. It would work, and I do have the fuel to do it just because this rocket is really overbuilt. But we're going to try a different technique. Again, place maneuver node right after that marker. You right-click the middle, and this button here moves the node to the next orbit. You can continuously click it to keep moving it forward in time, and eventually that other ship is going to come around here. So now I'm just slightly ahead of them. If I do a tiny prograde burn right there, that will get us pretty much right on top of each other. And it's only 7.7 meters per second. It's a little more than a day in the future, so not even that long in the future, but it's several orbits. Okay. Now this isn't very dialed in, and I'm not even going to bother dialing it in because when you're doing a rendezvous, a tiny, tiny change in velocity makes a huge difference in how close you get to your target. And the maneuver nodes, if you have a maneuver node active, then the intercepts are always just going to show you what the prediction for the node is. They're not going to show you the actual intercept for your current orbit. And so as soon as I get to this point, I'm going to use the node to figure out when I need to burn and how much I need to burn, but I'm not actually going to follow the node. I'm going to actually delete it just before I start the burn. And that way I can watch the intercept markers in real time and get a much closer approach than I would if I just tried to follow this blue maneuver. Now, since this is telling me that it's only going to be a 0.4 second burn at full throttle, I'm going to turn my thrust limiter way down, just like we did with the MUN. Now it's an 8-second burn. I'm going to have a lot more control over the positioning of it. Okay. Now, since this node is several orbits in the future, if I click over here, it won't let me do the warp to maneuver, but there's this little green button here on the DV meter that will warp me to that maneuver. Okay. And I happen to know that it is a prograde burn, and you can tell that because the blue marker is close to that one. So I'm going to lock the prograde. I'm going to delete the maneuver. Here we go. As soon as I pass that down pointing marker, the nodes, or these markers, are going to start showing the prediction for the next orbit, and I'm going to watch that change as I do the burn. If the burn was really long, you could start it before you actually reach that marker, but I know this burn is very short. Okay, markers changed, and now as I start this burn, you can see them start to get closer and closer together. So anything under 5 kilometers is generally fine, but you can usually get a lot closer with this method. Like that. Okay, don't forget to turn the thrust limiter back up. And now we can warp over to just before the intercept. This is also a good time to good reminder to use quick saves. Once you have something the way you want it, you usually want to quick save in case you screw up the next part. I haven't really been doing that in this playthrough, but it's definitely something you want to be doing. Oh, check that out. Okay, so that just got me the Rendezvous progression contract. Okay, so there they are. Switch the Navball to target mode, lock onto retrograde, and start reducing your relative speed. 1, 2. Okay. One thing you can do here is you want to try to push retrograde onto anti-target. I burned a little too much there. When you burn, retrograde will move away from where you're aiming, and you want to get retrograde onto anti-target. Like that. And when those are aligned, it means you're moving directly towards the target. So I didn't reduce all my speed to 0 and then had to start accelerating towards the target again. I actually used my existing speed towards the target, but just changed its direction. So now I'm moving towards the target more directly. One of the keys to rendezvous and docking is you want to move slow. I'm probably actually moving a little bit too slow here. But it's much easier to manage things if you keep your relative speed low, and then just use time warp if you need to close distance faster. So you can see, because our orbits aren't exactly the same, that retrograde direction is moving off of the marker. So now we can just do another small correction here. You want to get about 100 meters away and then come to a complete stop. Like that. And quick save. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. I happen to know that there's probably going to be a contract for crew transfer coming up. And again, you can satisfy those with a rescue mission. It's a good way to do it. Aha, so we have the dock contract, which we're going to do on this flight, and we're going to do the crew transfer. So this is a bit tricky because we want to have them swap places. So we're going to get Jeb out. Have him let go. Actually, no, don't have him let go. Okay. The square brackets will let you quickly switch between nearby ships. So we're going to go over to this guy's ship. Have him EVA. Got to find the other one. Ah. That's weird. The F4, if you don't see this vessel label, sometimes F4 will bring it back. All right, turn on RCS. So this would be a good lesson in Navball Flying. What you want to do here is get your prograde marker directly onto the target marker. And the A and D keys will kind of just drive it left and right. And shift and control will move it up and down. And when those are perfectly aligned, it means you're moving directly towards the target. Again, you don't want to move too fast here. 5 meters per second, probably enough. Okay, so before I grab on, he's on the other side, isn't he? Gotta find the hatch. Yeah, okay, so Jeb's in the way. So I need to switch to Jeb, let go, move out of the way, switch to Ludster, grab and board. And that should complete the crew transfer. This will be interesting. Yeah, why don't I just have them swap places? I'll just put Jeb in this one. I could have avoided this problem if I had brought a capsule with another seat. But this works too, just takes time. Jeb lives in space now. No, Jeb lives in the derelict now. But we're going to recover this one, remember, because we need to do that docking anyway. Okay. All right, Ludster, you're up. So we're going to arm the klaw. Point towards our target here. R to turn on RCS. And then we're going to use precision mode. So if you hit caps lock, the control indicators down here will turn blue, which means precision mode is on. And it reduces all of your inputs, both rotations and translations. It makes it a lot easier to do the fine manipulations that you need to do with RCS. So kind of like what we just did, you want to drive prograde around, press H to move towards the target forwards. And then we're going to drive prograde around on the nav ball using the I, J, K, L keys. So L moves it to the right, J moves it left, K moves it up because it's inverted pitch. I moves it down. And so we're going to put prograde right on the target, which means we're moving right towards them. And again, you don't want to go too fast here. Use time warp if you need to get closer. Okay, I'm pretty close. I'm going to use the N key here to stop. Now we need to get aligned. There's a few different ways to do this. But I'm going to do something that would work for docking too. So if with the klaw, you don't have to line up docking ports. You just have to hit a flat enough surface. But I'm going to try and do this as if I was docking. So one trick for this, because I can't actually turn this ship, it doesn't have any electric charge, I can look at its nav ball to figure out which way it's pointing. It's at heading 30, about 10 degrees pitch, right? So if I were go over to, excuse me, back to my ship, and I turn to heading 30, at about 10 degrees pitch, right about there. If you cycle the camera mode to locked, this will match the ship's orientation directly. And so you can tell that these ships are actually pointed now in almost exactly the same direction. So now we're pointing in the right direction, but we need to get close to the ship. It looks like I'm actually a little bit in front of it. It's hard to see. So with RCS, I'm going to move backwards. So N. Just give myself a little bit of room to play with here. Okay. So now you can actually see the target on the nav ball. And I drifted a little bit. There. Okay. Gonna come to a stop. So if we use locked mode and then look through the engine, I can tell that the target is down and to the right. So I'm going to press L to go move to the right and I to move down. And now if I press H a little bit too, I'll start moving forwards. And I want to drive prograde on the nav ball so that it's on the target. I actually want it past the target, and I'll explain that in a second. I can get this lined up. Oh, they are actually slightly rotating. Okay, so it's heading 23, about 20 degrees pitch. Right around there. Okay. Okay, so still I'm driving prograde around on the nav ball, and what I want to do is get it past the target marker. If I draw a straight line from the nose through the target marker, then I want prograde on the other side of the target from there. Because I want to get aligned with the ship before I actually hit it. If prograde was right on the target marker, then I would hit it directly, but I want to get on that right axis. So I'm leaving prograde past the target. And slowly, let me back up a little bit. Okay, and then once it's aligned, oops, here I'll back up just a little to demonstrate. Once it's aligned, you want to get prograde back on the target marker. So you want your nose, prograde, and target all in a stack like that. Do any adjustments you need to. Nailed it. Okay, and that completes the docking contract. Now look, so this monoprop meter is a little bit deceptive because it includes the storage from the lander can. That used, where is, yeah. So there's 10 units there, 20 units here. So that used like 2 units of monoprop. When you set these things to translation only, and you use precision mode, you can dock with very, very little monoprop. You don't need much at all. Okay, now I guess we don't have the retrograde hold because Jeb is in this cockpit. There's some weird things that happen sometimes with the klaw docking. It's not a big deal. Okay, we need to re-enter, so burn until periapsis is about 30K. I'm good to go. Remember to change the navball to surface mode. I'm a little concerned about heat on that upper pod because if I didn't grab it directly in the middle, then a little bit of it is going to get exposed. And this part, the lander can, doesn't have great heat tolerance. So we just have to be very careful with with the orientation here. I probably could have used more of my fuel to do a braking burn and maybe reduce that risk. Okay, here we go. Maybe I didn't even worry. Yeah, didn't even see a heat bar. Okay, and the chute's already armed because I staged it with the decoupler. It ran out of electric charge. His SAS was trying to fight it that whole time. I probably could have tweaked the parachute setup for this a little bit, but it's no big deal. Mission success.